Welcome back to another Mackem in the Middle podcast after another Sunderland League game after what has been a very long 2-week break for international football. And I think I've shared my thoughts on that plenty of times in the past. It is an absolute bore fest, especially when you're watching Southgate's England. But nonetheless, Sunderland were back in league action on Saturday, depending when you are listening to this, in a game that did finish 0-0. Against a team that are notorious this season for 0-0 draws, and we'll get onto the game very shortly with Michael. But the first thing I will say is it must be the most depressing, boring, tiring thing ever being a Preston fan this season.
Do you know what, right? I think, I can get a few people were saying this on social media after the game, weren't they? That a lot of people said it must be tiring being a Preston fan, watching them time waste and all that. Compared to watching what teams were like in League One, I thought the only time Preston really time wasted was probably the last 20 minutes. But maybe that was Freddie Woodman, the ex-Newcastle player, doing that just to annoy us. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But I do get what you mean. They've scored the fewest amount of goals, but they've also conceded the fewest, haven't they?
I think they've something stupid. I think they've conceded like 3-4 goals this season. I could be wrong. I'll quickly check while you.
I will know that. I don't think they've conceded a goal on the road. Actually, I think all the goals they've conceded have been a deep deal. But if you're checking that, I might be wrong on that fact. Now that I come to think of it, but in general, I mean, Preston, I thought really didn't offer that much. I think the only chance they really had was the Ched Evans one in the second half. I mean, I know we had a couple of goal line clearances, but I think we had them comfortably dealt with more than anything else. But I suppose, to be fair, if it was the other way around, you'd be saying we had efforts cleared off the line, so you could count those, I suppose. But there was a couple of Preston fans that apparently after the game were saying outside the ground, apparently were saying, how did you not batter us? We're absolutely terrible. But I suspect eventually I think it'll start clicking for them going forward. So I'm not too despondent, but I do get the point you're taking.
Yeah. They've played 11 games, scored 3 goals and conceded 4.
Okay, that's not exactly enthralling, is it?
It's not. And I don't know the exact number, but I'm fairly sure that's now their 5th, maybe 6th 0-0 of the season. And obviously, like I say, we are 11 games into it. But just obviously, we'll get into the Sunderland part of the game and the little bits that did happen, because quite frankly, not much did actually happen in the game. But from a Preston point of view, it was very much a case of very good defensively, but never really looked very threatening going forward. I don't think we've mentioned the one chance I think Alessi had to clear off the line, but other than that, they never really looked like scoring really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I think I kind of expected that. In some senses, I expected them to be. I don't know what the right word is. I expected them to be compact. I expected them to be very tough to break down, but I didn't expect them. But I mean, I did say that before the game I'd have been disappointed not to keep a clean sheet against them, considering that they don't score that often. So yeah, in that sense, we've done all right. But yeah, Preston really just didn't do that much, and I think you could tell the last 20 minutes. I think I said earlier that in the last 20 minutes, you could tell that they definitely came up here for a point, which in their defensive, that's what they came up here to do. Then it worked. So, but you're right, they didn't really do all that much. I've seen. They put it this way: there'll be teams that do a lot more against us going forward than they did.
Yeah. Obviously, the team that Sunderland put out, I don't think there was too much of a surprise there. Obviously, Stewart is still out and he's probably not going to be back until after the World Cup. Ellis Sims, there was talk about him. Well, initially, people thought he could be available for, was it the Watford game?
There was very small talk about that, but I think there was.
Yeah.
They were really looking at him being back after the international break, but he's back at Everton for scans now, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe. I think there was a few things said about that. I don't know whether he's gone back or whether he is going back for scans. I'm not sure, but obviously he was missing. Obviously Jewison Bennett, however you say his name, because I've heard about 5 different pronunciations
I've just
of
stuck
his name.
with Bennett, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think I'm just sticking with that till being told otherwise.
Yeah, obviously he's just come back from Korea, I think it was, on international duty with Costa Rica as well. So, I don't think he was ever really in line to start the game against Preston. So in terms of starting 11, like I said, I don't think there was any real surprises there.
No, I mean, like I said, when you look at I think in patches going forward, it looked a little bit disjointed. But in some senses, I still thought we played all right. But again, you could definitely tell that some of these players had just been on international duty. I mean, like again, you look at Bennett when he came on, it was extremely raw. Barr, obviously, I thought looked all right when Arthur Barr looked all right, and so did Diallo when they came on. But yeah, it is one of those. I mean, like you said, I suppose the international break is. Well, I mean, I know this might be completely irrelevant to what you were talking about, but for me, like, I mean, I spent the international break watching Hartlepool, so
yeah,
I could. So I mean, I suppose, yeah, I'll just stop there before I ramble on too much.
yeah. Anything's better than England at this point, I think.
Yeah,
Especially during.
I think that goes without saying at this point. Although I watched a 0-0 draw again last
Yeah.
week, Hartlepool Gillingham, so bit of a shortage of goals recently.
Yeah, but it was good to see Gillingham in action again.
It kind of was. It was really interesting. It was really interesting because obviously, I mean, I just wanted to get to a game, and it just was coincidence that Hartlepool were playing Gillingham. And yeah, it was interesting seeing them playing Hartlepool when last year we were playing us in the league. So it's that was really weird. But hopefully it's decided to get on. Well, like I said, unless Gillingham somehow go up to the Championship, I'm hoping we're not playing them in league football ever again. Same way most of the teams in League One.
Yeah, hopefully so. But on the game, and like I said, there really wasn't too much to talk about in the game, so we'll try and pad out as much as possible. But overall, although we didn't get the 3 points, and in home games against most teams in this league, you kind of want to get the 3 points. At home in front of 41,000, I think it was there on Saturday. You want to be getting the win. We did finish 0-0, like we said, but in terms of performance. You could question the final ball, the final pass, the final movement, and obviously the finishing as well. But overall performance from Sunderland wasn't bad at all.
No, it wasn't. Like I said earlier, I think that I've said this on my channel. I've said this on social media. I think that the efforts was there. I think the endeavour and the fight was there. You could tell that there was a plan of what we were trying to do. It just wouldn't fall for us. There was a couple of times in the first half when, particularly Elise, who seems to have developed into a winger these days, goes into the box, puts it across the face of goal, and I think there was one occasion in the first half where he flashed the ball across the 6-yard box, and I think Elliot Embleton was at the back post, and if he just gambled and went for the ball, that's 1-0 because he's unmarked pretty much at the back post, from what I can remember. So yeah, it's like, I think there was a phrase I heard from a Big Bad Wolf reference where we huffed and puffed but couldn't break the house down. I think that's kind of that for me. That analogy kind of sums up the performance. But it wasn't through a want of trying though. We definitely did create chances, but I think it just goes back to the point that it's weird though because we scored 5 goals in the 2 games prior to this one without a forward. But I still stand by it. We do need to get Ellis Sims back sooner rather than later. Eventually you do feel the lack of a forward. But again, we created enough chances to win the game. It was just like you said, the final pass, the decision making, the final cross ball, whatever it is, it just wouldn't fall for us. But to be fair, I've said this before. I think better teams than us have been frustrated by Preston this season. Burnley didn't beat them. I think who else didn't beat them? I think Luton, who tend to be a formidable force, lost at home to them. So it's not the end. It's not disastrous. The performance was definitely there, and I think that's why a lot of people seemed content enough. I mean, there were people clapping at the end of the game, because you could see that the effort was there, and you could see what the plan was. We were trying to do something, and we're going to have games like that where it just doesn't fall for us. What did you think of it?
I think it was a very boring game, to be honest.
You've just made me sound like I'm talking complete shite there. But I know what you mean. Yeah, it wasn't the most enthralling game.
I think Nick Barnes actually said it. I think it was on BBC Newcastle when he was talking to Moby after the game that no one could have possibly predicted a 0-0 draw in that game.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what was Tony Mowbray's comment after the game? He said it was a bit of a stodgy game. I think that was the exact quote that he used. But yeah, I think stodgy kind of sums it up. Yeah. And obviously the nice little sarcasm from Mr. Barnes, where he's absolutely 0-0 draw. A home team without a forward, the away team can't score goals.
Yeah.
I mean, funny enough, right? Part of me actually in my head thought we'd lose 1-0 only because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, because of superstitious reasons, because
we're a Sunderland fan.
Well, yeah, basically. This reason, Preston haven't scored. Preston can't score for Toffee. Preston don't know where the back of the net is. Oh, along comes Sunderland. That's what it more or less felt like. And I felt like because I think some of our fans were going to underestimate Preston and think it was a walk in the park. But so in that sense, we've done a bit better than what my head said we would do. But yeah, I just watched the EFL highlights package earlier, and I was surprised that game wasn't last. To be honest, I think it was like 7th or 8th in the order, so that even, I suppose, that tells you how astonishing it was. But yeah, wasn't a great game.
And obviously, one of the other talking points that people brought up on the radio, on Twitter, and on whatnot, and it's probably easier to say after a draw, especially had we won the game, it wouldn't have been mentioned. But was this the first game? As I say, the first game. I think it's only been really 3 without the 2. But is this the first game where we've really missed the presence of Ross Stewart or Ellis Sims? Because, like you said, a couple of times in the game, especially during the second half, when the likes of Diallo, or I should say Ahmad, and obviously Bennett came on. I think Bennett, within a couple of minutes of coming on, put a very good ball in the box, and 9 times out of 10, exactly where the ball landed is where Ross Stewart would have been stood. And so, like I say, it's hindsight, it's ifs and buts. But is that the first game where you look at and think we needed Ross Stewart or we needed Ellis Sims?
Yeah, I mean, again, like down the line, you are going to miss them. I mean, and even I think we miss any forward at the moment, but especially with a player like Ross Stewart. I think we said this might have been after the Borough game, where when he got off injured, you could definitely notice him a lot more when he's not there, because we've been used to the effort he puts in, the pressing from the front, the tracking back, the causing problems for people, coming back to receive the ball. Positional senses, you definitely do miss it. And I think this is the first game where we really did. It's the first game, I think, where we did feel the effects of it. I think someone made a point on social media, and it was probably a point I didn't consider until now, that the false 9 thing that we're deploying at the moment is probably better suited away from home, because we're going to counter attack a bit more. Whereas at home, we're going to have a bit more of the ball. And therefore, you need someone maybe sometimes to help unlock a defence, like what Stewart can do. So, yeah, I mean, so basically just draw home games, win our away games by the sound of it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, we did miss. I'm not going to pretend we didn't miss them, because we did. If a striker had, but again, it's not even just the fact without a striker. I still believe it's just a bit of better decision making. We win that game for me. It's just something we just have to address going forward. I mean, we still have some players with quality to be able to score goals. I mean, I think the Reading and Watford games proved that. So we've just got to make sure. Like I said, I think the main thing is just to try and keep getting goals and keep ticking points away until Sims and especially Stewart return.
Yeah. I think the other thing, kind of outside of performance-wise from the game, which is probably worth mentioning because, quite frankly, I don't really know what else to talk about, is how many fouls Preston seemed to get away with throughout the game. I think Jack Clark was probably the most fouled player on the pitch. And I think quite a few of them fouls were from the same player, who in the end I don't think got booked. And as the game goes on, if you're making the fouls, you're not getting cards. If you're the team doing the fouling, the game does play out to your advantage a bit.
Well, it does. I mean, if the referee's going to allow it constantly, then to be fair, why would you not do it? It's one of those things. I mean, well, to be honest, we never get anything of that sort of benefit. If we kept doing that, then we'd probably have at least 2 players sent off. Whereas anyone who does it against us seems to get the benefit of the doubt, annoyingly. And Preston did start to do that a few times. There was about, I think I said in the first half, there was about 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5 occasions where they were being pretty dirty and nasty with some of their challenges. And I think it took till midway through the second half for the first card to finally be shown, which I mean, we've talked about referees enough times. I'm not going about it again. But all I'll say is there's a reason that we say that EFL referees are not very good. So
yeah, and I think the other thing was just the same. Especially in the second half, I think there was 3 minutes added on. Quite frankly, it could have been 33, and I still don't think we'd have scored. So not to kind of use it as any kind of excuse or anything like that, but I was just surprised at how little time was actually added on. Because like you said, that Preston did waste time for large parts of the game, but as the game went on, like you said, last 20, 25 minutes, a ball would go out for goal kick, they'd take forever. You had all the fouls. You've got the subs. Obviously, I think Sunderland made all 5 of their subs. I think maybe 4. For there to be 3 minutes added on at the end of the game was bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, if not bizarre, at least a bit questionable. I was expecting it to be at least about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, it just goes to show that I think it just goes to show some of the officials in this league, and especially in the lower leagues like Leagues 1 and 2, don't know what they're doing.
Because I think I could be wrong on this, but I'm fairly sure the average time for like a sub, for example, is about 30 seconds. So if we take 30 seconds into account for each sub that got made, there must have been 6, 7 made in the second half. I think. I think Sunderland made 4. I think Preston made maybe 3 or 4 as well. So however much time that is, you've got the time waste and you've got the injuries. There was definitely more than 3 minutes to be added on.
And wasn't there at least 2 instances, I think, in the second half where there were supposed head injuries, or at
Yeah,
least
there was.
stoppages
Yeah,
in play because of injuries. So
yeah.
I'm just trying to have a look at the lineups to see how many subs, because we made 4 subs in
I
the
know
game.
too. I think Ahmad and Abdullah Bar obviously came on at the same time. So in
Yeah,
terms of
fair enough. Yeah, and then obviously Bennett and Diaco. So we made them in 3 different intervals. So it couldn't have
yeah,
made a fifth one. I think it would wanted to.
yeah,
Preston made 3 of them. One at Parrot. Hang on. Oh, okay. Evans started the game, didn't he?
yeah.
Sorry, for some reason I thought Troy Parrott started the game. So Parrott came on 67th minute. Woodburn came on. I think that's Ben Woodburn. I might
It
be wrong.
is. Yeah,
Ben Woodburn came on 73rd minute, and then McCann came on in the 86th minute, replacing Robbie Bray. So yeah, so they made it in 3 separate intervals. So if you're saying that's what 30 seconds average about, especially when Preston again last 25 minutes they make those subs, which is a coincidence.
yeah,
They make those 3 subs. So you say that's 30 seconds each, then that's about a minute and a half. Then there was about 2 stoppages in play in the second half, I think, or certainly at least one, which stopped for about at least 2 minutes.
yeah,
So how they didn't get longer than 3 minutes, I have no idea.
yeah. But like I say, I don't think in the grand scheme of things it would have made too much of a difference whether it
No,
was
probably
3
not.
or however much added on, because I think the game was just set for a draw. The way Preston especially had set up, and the way Sunderland were not necessarily not looking dangerous going forward, but not looking dangerous enough
They
in
were
the
getting
final third.
they were getting held pretty well by Preston in the end, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but it just goes to show that we've just spent probably about 5 minutes talking about how long it takes to make a sub and how long the added time was. I suppose that says a lot about how enthralling the game was.
Yeah, exactly. But on the subs that came on, obviously a few of them are still kind of getting up to speed, getting used to English football. Obviously Ahmad, he's played in England, he's played in the Champions League, Europa League. So in terms of him kind of adapting, I don't think that's going to take too long. And I think we've seen glimpses of him, especially against Watford when he came on, that he will, prove to be a good player. And whether he starts games, whether he comes on for the last 20, 30 minutes of a game, he'll have a part to play. Obviously, Jason Bennett, he looks to be a very, very fast player for a start, exciting player. And, as he gets more game time, is the kind of final third quality will improve with time, and obviously the likes of Abdullah Bar and Michu as well, who's obviously still not yet to make an appearance in the squad. But the players that did come on, especially Abdullah Bar and Jewison Bennett, I think that's their home debut as it is, because I don't think they played in any of the other games up until now. But people talked about Abdullah Bar on Twitter after the game about how much he impressed. Obviously we know about Jewison Bennett, he scored 2 for Costa Rica in the national break, obviously got equalised with Watford.
Yeah.
They are 2, focus on them 2 especially, they are 2 players that could be, very valuable come the end of the season.
I agree. I mean, I thought Bennett was I think he was very, very quick, but very raw.
Yeah.
When he came on. But again, he has shown quality. Obviously, you don't score twice away for Costa Rica unless they're playing San Marino or something. When you if you don't have something about you, and the goal he scored at Watford, I think I said on that podcast that the touch and composure he showed at that point in the game to score is really understated, especially for an 18-year-old who's moved pretty much very far away from home.
Yeah.
So and then obviously Bar, I thought looked good when he came on. I thought he was very good at Watford when he came on, and I thought yesterday was no different. I think obviously it was a different type of challenge where there you had a bit more freedom to run at because Watford was sitting back. But I suppose you had a little bit of freedom here. But I mean, like, we had a bit more drive that game because we were losing. But I think that in general, if these players get used properly, and Tony Mowbray's track record, especially at Blackburn, suggests that hopefully they will be, I think they're going to prove to be 2 very, very good signings. And I thought Diallo, even though he didn't look as effective, I thought he looked a bit tidy when he came on. So I think it's weird though, because in previous weeks we've kind of bemoaned about the fact that the lack of subs and lack of options off the bench could cost us, and yet subs that we made at Watford gained us a point, and I thought made us look a little bit quicker and a bit more intent yesterday. So, but I agree with you. I think the signings that the players coming off the bench, I think will prove to be, with the right guidance, very good acquisitions from the club.
Yeah. And like we've said a couple of times now, we did finish 0-0, and I'd love to talk more about the game, but quite frankly, there was just nothing else to mention in the game, and the extra little bits that we'll obviously cover in the player ratings, which we'll get onto now. Start with Patterson, who, as far as I can remember, only had to make 1 save in the game, and it was a very good save from close range, just tipping it over the bar. Outside of that was relatively untested, couple of crosses into the box that he dealt with quite well. So I'll let you kick it off with Anthony Patterson.
Yeah, I'd say probably a 6, just because I think there was a couple of times that he tried to skin a couple of Preston players who were trying to press
He's
him,
done
which
that a
I
few
think
times this season.
which was almost raising my blood pressure to very dangerous levels. So that's one thing I noticed yesterday, that I wish he wouldn't try to do that so often.
He's got away with it every time, to be fair.
Sorry?
He's got away with it every time so far.
He has. I think eventually it will catch up with him if he keeps on trying to do it. I mean, I don't mind confidence. I don't mind, obviously, trying to do it. But obviously, there's a time and a place to do that. And there's a time and a place just to get rid of it into Rose End. But in general, but to be fair to him, that's the only thing that stopped me maybe giving him a 7. Other than that, as you said, relatively untested. And when he had to do something, met the challenge. So I can't really criticise him too much.
Yeah. And then Gooch, on to him next.
Probably another 6. I think another sort of standard, solid defensively as ever. And I've stood by the fact that I still believe his best position is either as a fullback or a wing back, because I think his defensive attributes are really, really valuable. Going forward, was largely quiet in my opinion, but again, not for a want of trying.
Yeah. On to obviously the defence, and starting with Luke O'Nien at the right side of the back three, as it was.
I'd say probably on the whole about a 7. I thought Luke O'Nien was relatively comfortable. But I mean, I suppose to be fair, you judge the centre backs because they didn't really have that much to deal with for most of the game. But the times when Luke O'Nien had to be composed and just get things going, I thought he did. Maybe a couple of times some of the crosses and the balls that he was trying to get going forward just didn't quite land to his man that he was aiming for. But on the whole, defensively, I thought again fairly sound for what was required in the game.
Yeah. And obviously, alongside him, Danny Bart, who's been a mainstay in the team for a long time now. I can't actually remember the last time he actually missed a game off the top of my head.
But I think he ended last season as a pretty mainstay for the last dozen or so games.
Obviously, I think there was a Bolton game last season where he obviously scored the own goal and we got hammered and whatever else happened. I think he was dropped after that, came back into the team, and I think, as far as I can remember, he's been in the starting 11 for every single game since league, especially anyway.
Yeah, no, I can't think of any. Obviously, in all competitions, the only game I think you'll have missed is Chef Wed, but obviously, pretty much everybody missed that game who's starting. But Danny Bart, strong 7. I think his leadership skills are so invaluable, and it just goes to prove for me that I'm amazed that this recruitment team managed to get him when I think he was playing quite regularly for Stoke last season, or at least semi-regularly. So
I think we got him in January, I think it was, wasn't it?
That's what I mean.
I think he got Player of the Month for Stoke in December, I think it was, at the time.
So that suggests then that he was playing somewhat regularly, at least in the immediate lead up to his departure in January. So to get him when we were in League One, that's pretty impressive stuff. And obviously aside from the Bolton game, which I think we want to forget in a hurry, that aside, I think he's generally been quite solid. And again, I think the Preston game was absolutely no different. I think he just showed the composure when he needed to, held the back line really well, and it just goes to prove that why people saying he's been one of our best players this season.
Yeah. Obviously, alongside him was Aji Elise, or Alessi, or Alessia, however you say him as well. And, we've said it a few times how he had a kind of rocky start when he came to Sunderland against Sheffield Wednesday. And quite frankly, he was awful in that game. Obviously, Cirkin picked up an injury. He's come back into the starting 11. And ever since he's come back in, he's looked pretty remarkable on that left side of the defence. He's good going forward. He can play the ball, he can defend, he can win his headers, and obviously he got the goal against Watford, and I think it was him in the first half that very nearly, I think it was just a few inches wide of the far post, that almost gave Sunderland the lead as well. So I thought he was very good again against Preston.
Yeah, I'd probably go with an 8. I think, I had a different man of the match in mind yesterday, but I think I might be tempted to change it to Elise. I think Elise it just goes to prove against Watford. A couple of times he could have stopped crosses in that game, but in general, in that game, he was quite good. And in this game, I thought he had a bit more license going forward. Like I said, it was amazing because sometimes he was playing as a winger or maybe what looked like an inside forward. So created a good couple of opportunities, especially in the first half, again, in the left side of the penalty box, just to get the ball across the face of goal. And if someone had just gambled on it, or there'd have been a bit more luck in that department, then he probably could have scored. So, but on the whole, I think he's really looked very good the last couple of games. And if anything, it just shows Dennis Cirkin's going to have to force his way back into the team if he keeps this up.
Yeah. On the left-hand side, obviously, Jack Clark again. A couple of times, especially in the first half, I think he was kind of facing his own goal a little bit too much. Preston didn't really make enough of it and didn't really force him into any mistakes, and he dealt with it quite well. But I think Jack Clarke's at his best when he is facing the opposition goal. He can drive forward with the ball, and I think especially second half he saw that. So I thought it was a fairly decent game with him without necessarily creating too much again in the final third.
Yeah, debate between a 6 or a 7 here. Do you encourage me to go 6.5 or do you want me to go whole numbers?
We'll go whole numbers. Why not?
All right, okay, just to make it harder. Thanks. I'll probably go with a 6 only because I've seen Jack Clarke play better than that. But again, I think this was a game that doesn't really suit him that much because he didn't really have. Preston didn't allow him as much space to run into because they were very compact, especially in the latter stages. So I think Jack Clarke was getting a lot. I think it was just a bit frustrating for him. So not his game, but he still looked all right on the ball. He still looked fairly tidy. He tried to get things going forward, but it's just one of those days where, like the rest of the team, it just didn't click for him.
Yeah. On the midfield, starting with Corey Evans, who I don't know if you listen to BBC Newcastle after the game. I don't know who does, who doesn't, but there was someone that called in and was pretty irate, I think, at the point that Corey Evans is still starting and questioning what his role in the team is, why he's there, what experience he brings. Just completely ruled out any kind of impact he has on a game. And realistically, I think 6-7 months ago, people would agree with that. And as we've said a couple of podcasts now, ever since he's kind of, again, similar to Danny Batth, since he'd come back into the team, he's been one of the most important players. And I think if you can't see the role that he plays in this team, then football probably isn't your sport.
You took all the words out of my mouth, to be honest. I get 6-7 months ago, I think that person's right. I think that Corey Evans, obviously, we didn't really get the role he had in the team, but I think that person must have conveniently missed the last dozen or so games of last season where he was very instrumental.
Or you missed the last 6 months of football.
Yeah, basically. You want to look at it that way. The last 6-7 months, he's been really, really important to the way that we set up, and he's brought that calming presence in the midfield. And it's one of those things that I'll not try and get on the rant too much, but it's one of those things that annoys me about some football fans where they can't see just because a player's not flashy and brilliant and does all the fancy stuff doesn't mean they don't have a role in the team. You need someone who's just going to have a right. I'm not saying for 1 second Corey Evans is like Jordan Henderson, but the point I'm making is that Jordan Henderson sometimes gets this criticism himself where he's not. What does he do? What does he do? He doesn't go forward. Well, actually, Liverpool sometimes when he hasn't played have missed him. And I think Sunderland have missed Corey Evans when he hasn't been present because he brings that calming presence and manages to get things as simple as getting things ticking over.
I think the best way to kind of describe Corey Evans, and I think like again it kind of suits the likes of Jordan Henderson and probably quite a few other players in football, is he's a very important player without being great at anything.
Yeah, exactly. And if you notice, every successful team has a player like that. Where because if they do that sort of simple, effective, and I suppose gritty, ugly side of the game, it allows other players to flourish more when they want to go forward because it builds trust in the midfield, knowing that they've got someone like that next to them. As far as his role in the Preston game is concerned, yeah, I'd say a 7. I was going to go with a 6, but I'm just going to go with a 7 because that comment got me. Yeah, I think Corey Evans was fine. Again, just kept things ticking over, just being consistent as ever. Obviously, I think down the line, we're going to have to accept the fact that he might get injured at some point, or we might end up losing him for a period of time, and that's where I think other players will have to step up. But as far as we've got him and he's playing all right, just keep using him. Yeah, 7 for me. Unspectacular, but very solid.
Yeah, and obviously alongside him, Dan Neil, who I think had one of his more quieter games, I think, against Preston. I think, again, that's kind of to be expected with the way Preston's set up. They don't allow Sunderland any space. And I think that's the type of game that Dan Neil does thrive in, where he can find little pockets of space. And, you've got the likes of Ross Stewart or Ellis Sims or Robert or whoever's playing in front of him to kind of make them runs into the channel or in behind. And he's got the ability to kind of pick out that pass through the gap. And Preston just left absolutely no space for him to kind of play them passes. I think there was a couple of times in the second half when Bennett came on, he did kind of release him in behind, didn't come to anything. But one of them games, I think Dan Neil, don't think he had a bad game in, but didn't really have too much of an influence on it.
Yeah, 6. I think I swear I'm going to be known as the person who does standard 6. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you compare, say, the Reading and the Preston games, Reading, we had so much room, and that suited Dan Neil to a T. And if you look at the the assist for Jack Clark's goal, which I'm still just going to mention because that goal's just brilliant. But if you if you assess it, like Dan Neil had loads of space to manoeuvre there because Reading didn't press at all or weren't compact whatsoever. Whereas in this game, it's completely different because Preston, you could tell their identity, what they wanted to do. And therefore, games like that don't suit Dan Neil because he doesn't have the freedom to express himself as much as he wants. Yeah. So in this game, like you said, I think it was one of his quieter games, but I think that's down to more how the opposition set up than his own performance.
Yeah. Patrick Roberts, again, he's a player that's come into the team ever since Ross Stewart and Ellis Sims got injured, and he's kind of been one of the most important players in the team, and obviously got a couple of goals the other week. I thought he had a very good game again against Preston, but again, like similar to a few other players, just couldn't find that final pass, that final touch, that final finish. I think it was one point, I think it was in the second half, where he's out wide like he likes to be. He's put it through the defender's legs, he's cut inside, and it's just inches wide of the post. And on another day, you might have someone arriving in at the back post to tap it in, and we're talking about a 1-0 win, Patrick Roberts assist and whatnot, but it wasn't to be. But in terms of what he did in the game, don't think he could have done awfully much more other than find the back of the net.
Yeah, I think for me, right, I think I'm gonna go with an 8 for him. I thought in general, without which sounds really strange in a 0-0 when he hasn't assisted or scored, but I think he was one of our more brighter outlets going forward. I think that Preston, there was a couple of times in the first half where Preston were backing off him and giving him room to try and do something because they know if you try to challenge him, then he could leave you for dust, basically. So yeah, I thought Patrick Roberts on the whole, I thought was pretty good. Certainly, probably for me, the best of our attacking players. And it goes to show why I wanted to see more of him in the team. And again, like you said, the chance he had in the second half, either his shot just goes a couple of inches inside the post and he goes in the back of the net, or someone taps it in. And then we talk about a 1-0 win. So he was unlucky as far as that there. But yeah, I thought he was our best player going forward yesterday.
Yeah. Alex Pritchard, again, similar to Dan Neil, a game that doesn't really get allowed any space, any time on the ball, and I think he's a player that does, again, thrive in that type of environment. So I think I know where this one's going.
Think you can 3 guesses. Same rating as Dan Neil, and half the players I've rated on this 6 as well. Again, it's just one of those where you don't have that much space in front of you, and that's where Alex Pritchard's best, when he can see a pass and there's an option in front of him. And some of the forward passes he makes is exquisite to watch at times. And in this game, again, it just didn't suit him. So I think we'll be playing less sterner defenses than Preston. I think that's where Pritchard will shine better.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've forgot anyone else other than Elliot Embleton. Yeah, I think he's the last one, I think. And I suppose there's 2 ways this could go, and I'm interested to see which way it does go.
Yeah, because I know you're not the biggest Elliot Embleton fan, are you? Yeah, for me, again, it's
I'll stop you there. The way I'll always describe Embleton is either incredible or anonymous, and he was one of them 2 things for me yesterday.
3 guesses where this one goes. I think I'll probably go with a 6 because I don't think anyone deserves lower than a 6, but he was certainly the quietest probably out of our options going forward. Again, right, is it Embleton or Pritchard who plays in the false 9 role? I need to have this cleared before I continue.
I think it's kind of one of them systems, especially now that we don't have a striker, where Roberts, Pritchard and Embleton just kind of switch. Yeah,
okay. Well, because Embleton, for me, in the first half, got himself into a good position down the right flank where he had the opportunity to maybe do something with it and didn't. Other than that, was pretty quiet. But again, I think it's down to the fact that Preston just made us anonymous in some senses. For me, the way I look at Embleton, so for me, a 6 for him. But for my general view on Embleton, I think he's one of these players that if you have him coming off the bench, I think he can have quite a good impact. Whereas I think starting games, I'm not necessarily convinced that he's not the best. Not that he doesn't give his all. Of course, he gives his all. But I don't think he's the best option to have from minute 1. I think if you bring him on with 20 minutes to go, I think he's actually not a bad option to have. But again, I think it's just by circumstance that he's playing there at the moment.
Yeah. And I suppose the other question is, if Embleton doesn't start, you've got Ahmad, you've got Bennett, you've got Diaku, you've got potentially Michu, potentially Abdullah Bar as well, although I think Bar is kind of more of a like a deep lying midfielder, I suppose, rather than someone who will play further forward. Who would be best suited to start in that Embleton role if he was to move to the bench?
For me, probably Diallo. Because I think if you look at it, Man United paid a lot of money for Diallo, and granted, yes, fees get inflated ridiculously these days. So obviously that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be great. But for me, I think if you're going to have, why would you sign him if he doesn't have something about him at least? So for me, I would like to think that he's definitely got enough about him to warrant maybe having a start. I mean, obviously, again, it depends how much of a pre-season he had, and it depends on how much. I don't know. It depends how much he was able to get minutes and how much he was able to influence things at Man United, how fit he is. But I'd like to see Diallo maybe have a start because I think Diallo looked all right when he came on. But again, Diallo might be another Embleton. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be.
I think the thing is with him as well is with him not starting games, he's coming on for 20, 30 minutes, especially in a game like Preston. And he's still a young player, but he has played in big competitions in the Premier League and in the Scottish Premier League and Europa League and whatnot. I think especially against Preston, not so much against Watford, you could sense a bit of kind of, I want to say nervousness, kind of didn't really want to try anything too spectacular when I think most people know he's got the ability. A few times he turned back and play the simple pass, in a 0-0 game when he's got the quality. Possibly like to see him just go his man a little bit more. And when he did that, he did it fairly well. There was one time he did it, and I think it was just on the edge of the box. He was taken out. He was fouled in a good position. And I think the referee didn't give anything for it, which was quite amazing. And I think that would have been a free kick in a very good position. But I think if he starts games, his confidence grows, and I think you will start to see more quality that he would bring.
Yeah. Again, it might be that sometimes it just takes a start to get yourself going, doesn't it? Though sometimes it just takes a run in the team, and then all of a sudden it's like in a way it's kind of like Jack Clarke in some senses. Where last year there were fans obviously that were less convinced with Jack Clarke, but as soon as he started games and got a run, then you started to see what quality he's got. So it might be the case with Amad Diallo. I'll put it this way: in the next between now and the World Cup, you're going to have So you got midweek games. You've got Blackpool coming this week. Then you've got Blackburn in a couple of weeks, haven't we? And then you've got Huddersfield not long after that. So we've got like 9 games in the space of basically 5 weeks. So these guys are going to get their minutes. And what's good is that Tony Mowbray's the type of person that strikes me as someone who protect them and who will put an arm around them. And for me, when people talk about experience, I think we've got one of the most experienced head coaches in the Championship. So I think that's something that's going to have an effect. So, but to sort of just end my drivel and answer your question, for me, I think I'd probably go with Diallo, but there's obviously other options that we can have. I think Bennett is better at the minute than coming off the bench. But I think, I don't know, I want to see Diallo have a run, but that's just because I want to see Diallo have a run in the team.
Yeah, that's fair. Man of the match, I think I would go Alessi. Don't know if you would go with him or Roberts.
I said, no, I'm going to go with Alessi, actually, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think Roberts is a close-up, but I think I'll probably have to go with Alessi just because he's a defender, and I think it's more impressive that he probably created more chances or more opportunities than Roberts did. So if I had to separate the two of them, I'd go with Alessi. But again, nobody deserved lower than a 6, but Alessi, I think he's come up leaps and bounds the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And last but not least, obviously Blackpool at home on Tuesday, quick turnaround, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some changes like we've mentioned, potentially Amad or Bennett or whoever could start. Whether Michu makes his way into the matchday squad or not is obviously yet to be seen. Obviously didn't have the best start to his playing career in England with a red card. I can't actually remember who it was against, but for the under-21s. But as people did point out, Jan Villa did the exact same thing. And he turned out to be a half decent player, I think it's fair to say.
That we decided not to go for a year later, but that's a different story.
We did, yeah. I think he's still playing in red and white, so at heart, he's still there.
One last dance?
Absolutely, for me, 100%. One player that I would love to see, but I think I say only 33. I think he's about 33 now, but I'd still take him back. But anyway, Blackpool on Tuesday. Another home game, a game that, again, I think you kind of want the win, and probably Sunderland will be expected to win. And if we don't win, I think not necessarily the focus, but I think part of the focus will turn back to the fact that we didn't beat Preston at home, and if we don't beat Blackpool, that's 2 points from 2 games that arguably should have been at least 4, potentially 6. So I would say Tuesday is as must-win a game as it can be at this stage of the season.
It's starting to become that way. I've said that I think before the Preston game, I looked at the next 4 games. I always look at games in blocks and sets of games and what you want from it. So maybe that's overanalyzing it, but that's the way I look at it. So I looked at Preston. I think it's then Blackpool, Swansea, and then Wigan. Out of the home games, I think Preston was the one that I was the most wary of. I'm not saying that Blackpool and Wigan are going to be easy. Obviously, we'll get the Wigan down the line. They won't be easy. But for me, Preston are the most established. They've got good players in their team. And I think that was the one I was most wary of us getting beaten. Obviously, it's not a given we're going to beat Blackpool, but I do actually think we will beat Blackpool. I think it might be a scrappy game because obviously without a forward, we do tend to miss a few chances. I think maybe a 2-1.
Yeah.
It's asked me to score prediction. I think a 2-1 Sunderland win, but I think it's one of those where if we don't win, there's a couple of little grumblings here and there. I still don't think there should be, even if we don't win the game, because we've generally had a pretty positive start. But it's one of these. I view Blackpool the similar way that I viewed the Rotherham game at home, the same way that I'll probably view Wigan at home in a couple of weeks, where it's one of those games where you really need to be looking to win. I think so.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Fair.
It's not a given, but I think we should be winning it.
Yeah. And of course, that is on Tuesday, so we'll have a reaction out to that game on probably Wednesday. So we'll get that done when the game comes around. And I say hopefully we are talking about home win and 4 points from a possible 6. But that is yet to be seen. But until next time, we will see you later.
That's all, folks.